Now, just a little warning before we begin that there will be major spoilers in this video for the latest episode of The Bad Batch, or the one called Rescue on Ryloth. So if you have not seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Okay, so as I talked about a little bit last week, I am so happy to see a multi-part episode or story, even if it was only 2 episodes and not 3 or 4 like we often saw with the Clone Wars story arcs. And one of the reasons the first episode of The Bad Batch, which was basically the length of 2 episodes, was arguably the best or easily among the best episodes, is the same reason why the later seasons of Clone Wars with all its long arcs, as well as this 2-parter here with Hera on Ryloth, was so good. Which is because it didn't feel like it was rushed or had to fit into a neat little 20-some minute formula of quickly introducing a conflict and then just as quickly resolving it. It had time to breathe, time to evolve, and time to give us some really great moments, and I thought there were plenty of them here in this episode. In fact, my favorite moment of the whole series so far just may have been when the doors to the base opened and out walked Hauser, being everything we'd come to expect out of the clones after 7 seasons of development in the Clone Wars series. All of which was robbed from them with just a few words from Palpatine, those being execute Order 66 of course, which turned them into, or most of them into, something more akin to the easily controlled and programmed droids they once were fighting, but clearly some of them are still holding on to who and what they once were. And in some ways to me this felt like an unofficial or final end to the Clone Wars in more ways than one, or of both the series itself as well as the real beginning of the end for the clone troopers. Like this single event, the Ryloth incident, let's call it, may be a sort of nail in the coffin for them, since their fate with the Empire was already sort of up in the air, and I think they were more or less planning to replace them, even if they seemed undecided. Because we've now seen that chip or no chip, some of them still remember who and what they once were, and won't become what the Empire now wants them to be, when they were once what the Republic needed them to be. And though this probably won't be the case, I would love it if the Ryloth incident spread across the clone army and was the catalyst for many more of them ending things with the Empire on their own terms. That the story of what one clone stood up and did, and those who followed him, would convince more and more of them to turn or defect or desert or whatever it might be, giving a sort of happy ending for some of the clones, that some of them decided their own fate and left on their own accord, while some, probably the majority, stayed behind and got discarded or left to who knows what in the end. Either way here, one thing that surprised me was that Crosshair didn't shoot Hauser when he was giving his little speech. That would have really solidified Crosshair as a villain in my eyes. Not that I'm upset that he didn't shoot Hauser, I've really come to like him in 2 episodes. However, that also would have probably turned Hauser into a martyr, and then this incident really probably would have spread throughout the clones. So for the sake of the Empire, I suppose, it's a good thing he didn't shoot. Nevertheless, I was surprised that Crosshair didn't shoot him, and I thought Hauser would then basically die looking up and watching as Hera and everyone else escaped. He would have died knowing he did what was right in the end, though now he gets to live knowing he did what was right, so I suppose that's better for him. And this ties into one of the sort of themes of this episode, which is, what is the purpose of a soldier, which I'll talk more about a bit later. And speaking of Crosshair shooting someone, it was confirmed that Orn Frita, the senator from Ryloth, was not killed in last week's episode, thus that part of the new canon is preserved, for now at least, since he was an important player in the book Lords of the Sith, which happens after all this, and many wondered if he had been killed and thus rendered to that book retcon now, though even in the last episode Admiral Rampart had said it was an attempted assassination, but this week it was 100% confirmed by the same Admiral Rampart that he is still alive. And while we're on the topic of Crosshair, it seems like he will finally be sent after the Bad Batch, and that the last 4 episodes of the season may be all about, or mostly about, not only him hunting his brothers or his former teammates, but that it will probably bring about a resolution to his story, that Crosshair will either be saved or possibly killed if he can't be saved, if maybe his chip can't be taken out, which could easily be a repercussion of getting his face burnt a few episodes back, that the chip is somehow melted in there, for a lack of a better way of putting it. And one thing around all this that has maybe bugged me a little bit is that they really haven't seemed all that interested in saving Crosshair or trying to save him, even though they know how to take out the chips now and know or strongly suspect that's what causing him to be their enemy, that it's controlling him. Not even Echo seems to care about saving him, and yes, I realize he's the one with the least amount of time or the smallest connection to Crosshair. He's the newest member of the team, but he knows a thing or two about being imprisoned and flat out being controlled or used against his will. And not a peep out of him about, well, not only saving Crosshair, but being upset about what's happening to the rest of the regs or regular clones, especially since he would of course be the one closest to them, having mainly served with regs and essentially being one himself still. And this isn't a major complaint or anything, it's just something I find a little odd, and I'm sure in these final 4 episodes this will change and the plan will become, how do we save Crosshair? This episode even kind of set that up, or set up a shift in their attitude towards him, since it was really all about family and what you'll do for them. Omega even talks about how she tried to save them all if she could, and they've certainly gone out of their way to save her before, and yet here they are not trying to save Crosshair and instead just always running away from him. And so maybe it'll all dawn on them now that they have to at least try, conveniently enough in time for the upcoming finale of Season 1. Anyway here, and like I was saying before, most likely they won't be able to get the chip out of his head, so who knows what happens then. Maybe Crosshair is able to overcome it on his own. We have seen moments of doubt and regret in him, and then he ends up rejoining the team and they all live happily ever after. Maybe I'm wrong and they can get his chip out, and that it's just extra dangerous after his face was burnt and the chip was melted to some degree, or maybe that's nothing and it wasn't melted at all. Or maybe even when they upgraded his chip in an earlier episode, they made it more difficult to remove, or maybe it's a combination of all of the above and they can't save him and tragically they have to kill him. They have to end up killing their brother or letting him die for some reason, or maybe he just lives and stays their enemy and is back for Season 2 and we do it all over again. Though I do think we will get a resolution to it all in this season, but that is just a guess. Moving on, another great yet subtle moment in this episode is when Hunter looks back at Hauser right before they make their escape with the Syndulla family, and right before Hauser goes out to try to talk some sense into his brothers. Again, one of the themes of these last 2 episodes, and the whole show really, as well as you could say the Clone Wars series before it, is what does it mean to be a soldier? Do good soldiers follow orders, or do they do what's right? And don't get me wrong, on the battlefield or in the heat of the moment, more often than not, you should just follow orders, work as a team, and do what you have to do to survive. I'm not saying you question everything always, but then there are times outside of combat when you know something is off, something is wrong, and things are changing, and you have to ask yourself if you still want to be a part of this, like Hauser does in this episode. Again, is he just supposed to follow orders, follow those he always has, even though they now call themselves Empire instead of Republic, or does he have to do what he knows is right? Omega, early in the episode when she's trying to convince the others to go back and free the Syndullas, even asks Hunter something like, what's the point of being a soldier if you don't help people? Which is a truly great question, and one Hauser faces too. He's not helping anyone anymore, he's merely subjugating and or controlling people he once fought to protect. And all this ties into the moral dilemma the Bad Batch have been facing since leaving the Empire/Republic, and I'm assuming will continue to face for a while. One that ties into the very theme of Star Wars itself, this whole selfless versus selfish thing. They have to figure out how much to look out for themselves, how much they're mercenaries that just want to take care of their family, as Hunter says at the end of the episode, and how much they should give to fight for the greater good. Which kind of leads to the question of how much do you keep asking of someone? Take Cham Syndulla, for example. He's known almost nothing but war his whole life and longs for peace above all else. You could argue he's earned the right to sit this one out, but as the saying goes, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, and so he continues to fight, and even his daughter will spend most of her life fighting as well. And so, if you couldn't tell, there's a lot I liked about this episode, or these 2 episodes, maybe I should say, and a lot I'm really enjoying about the series overall. Though, of course, maybe it doesn't go as deep into all these things as it could, but again, that's probably because of the broader range and audience it aims for. This was another episode where Omega, and this time Hera too, pull off some stuff that most kids, I'm guessing, probably wouldn't be able to pull off. And in all reality, I don't know that they'd be put in that situation in the first place by nearly anybody. I don't know that Hunter would really risk sending Omega and Hera by themselves, even if they were supposed to keep their distance. But again, these sort of things are in there for the younger viewer. They're in there for them to connect with and experience Star Wars through these younger characters in the show. And so the two of them flying around in a ship and not getting shot down or anything, I accept that. Not to mention, yeah, Hera will become one hell of a pilot, so I'm fine with what she pulled off here. Plus, I think overall, though the show walks the fine line between too adult for children and too childish for adults very well, it's actually skewed more toward the adult side of things, like Clone Wars was before it, unlike Rebels, which was certainly skewed the other way, more towards the childish side of things. But anyway here, other than all that, I could repeat the usual about how great it all looks, how amazing and beautiful the animation has been, and how D. Bradley Baker deserves crazy recognition for what he's doing with all these different clone characters. Not that he didn't do it before in the Clone Wars, but now pretty much each and every week or every episode, multiple clones are front and center, and somehow with his voice he makes them all feel unique and different, and it's just absolutely incredible. I'm also very excited for what these final 4 episodes will bring. I hope we get one larger 4-part arc, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm going to guess the next 2 episodes will be more self-contained, yet with a bit of setup for the final 2 episodes, which will probably be a 2-part thing or directly linked. Again, I think we'll see a resolution to Crosshair's story, and that this season just might end with the Empire deciding to put an end to the clone army once and for all, and maybe because of the Ryloth incident. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this episode and how you think the first season has gone and how you think this first season will end. Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thank you for watching.